for attending the first session of XBiz EU. The guest today, at this hour, is Pete Johnson. He's the CEO of ATVOD, which is the Authority for Television on Demand. It used to be Association for Television on Demand. Thank you very much, Pete.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, we should probably go through some nuts and bolts about ATVOD, particularly for our foreign audience here. Tell me about ATVOD. What is it designed for?
Okay, well, ATVOD was designated by Ofcom, which is the UK's media regulator, in 2010 to enforce new rules which were set at the European level by the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. That was required to be implemented into national states law by the end of 2009, and Ofcom was given the power to enforce those regulations, but it was also given the option to designate an industry co-regulator to do that job on its behalf. And after a couple of consultations, one by the UK government, one by Ofcom itself, decided to designate ATVOD, which, as Don said, was an association, was a trade association for the video on demand industry prior to that time. We changed our constitution in order to make us an authority capable of discharging its functions in a suitably independent manner. So we have industry representation on our board. We have a 9-person board, of whom 4 are drawn from the regulated industry, 5 are independent. And our function is to apply the rules set out in the Audiovisual Media Services Directive to UK providers of TV-like on-demand services.
Now, the backbone of ATVOD policy is Rule 11. Explain Rule 11.
Well, Rule 11 is certainly a very important rule. It's not the only rule we have, but it's certainly very important, especially to people in this room. Rule 11 states that if a video on demand service includes material which might seriously impair the mental, moral or physical development of under 18s, it can make such content available, but only if it secures that content cannot normally be seen or heard by under 18s. We interpret material which might seriously impair children to include material equivalent to that classified R18 by the British Board of Film Classification. So, in shorthand, we regard hardcore pornography as being material which might seriously impair the moral development of children. Therefore, if a service we regulate includes such content, including still images or videos or promos, it must make sure that such material is behind an access control mechanism which ensures that under 18s can't normally see or hear it.
And this on-demand content, everything from children's programming to adult programming.
Yeah, absolutely. We cover the full range of on-demand programs. Any type of content that might be seen in a television broadcast, if it's provided on demand, is likely to fall within our remit. So it goes from everything from services providing access to Teletubbies programs all the way up to the harder end of the adult business.
So websites must check their age verification, and you have something called a C or AC system, a CAC system. Explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. We provide guidance on how to comply with the rules, because we would actually, we think regulation works better if people pre-comply with the rules. So our system is based on the idea that service providers will want to be compliant, and that it's our job to help service providers be compliant. We do that by speaking to service providers all the time. We have a forum which we hold several times a year, which all service providers are invited to attend. And we also publish guidance on how to comply with the rules. And our guidance on Rule 11 says that if you are going to have material which is free to view, then that material must be softcore, not hardcore. It must not be equivalent to R18. And if you are going to have material that is equivalent to R18, then you must have a mechanism for ensuring that those who see it is 18. We say that we would accept restricting access to those who have presented a valid credit card. If you want to use payment mechanisms, other payment mechanisms, then you will have to have a secondary means of establishing the age of your customer. And there are various proprietary systems out there which will check passport numbers or other details against reliable third-party databases. The standard is actually pretty much exactly the same as that is operated for online gambling services in the UK. We're not setting a completely new standard. We're using the same standard that applies for online gambling services. So it's a pretty well-established system. Okay.
And you charge fees to the websites. In 2011, it started at £2,900. What is it today?
Right. When we started, we are funded solely from the fees that are charged to providers of regulated services. So we don't get any government subsidy. We're funded entirely by the industry we regulate. When we started in 2010, initially we had a flat rate fee of £2,900 per service. We quickly realised that was not appropriate, that it didn't reflect the wide range of service providers which were subject to regulation. So we moved very quickly to, first of all, introduce some concessionary rates for the very smallest providers, which in the first year were £150. And then from our second year onwards, we've had a banded system which has got 6 bands. So for this year, the lowest payment is £91 per year, and the highest payment is £12,302. But you would only pay the highest payment if you had a turnover exceeding £25.9 million a year.
Now, if you breach the rules of ATVOD, there are determinations and fines. Some companies have been fined and are closed. Here's a laundry list of websites and companies that have been hit by ATVOD: Booty Box, Playboy TV, and they're demanding adult and climax channels, websites. Abused Piggy, Studio 66, G-Spot. There are 9 sites, including I Love My Melons, My Glory Hole Confessions. Of course, there's Strictly Broadband, which XBiz has covered quite a bit about what has happened to that company. Rosewood Triple X, UK Pussy Talk, British Porn Super Site, British Spanker, British Amateur Multi-Site, English MILF, Black Vixen, UK Vixen, Sexy UK Porn Star, Splat, Bukkake, UK Porn Party, and Paul Raymond, some sites of that company. And just recently, MNS Media. What are the fines for these companies?
Well, today we have the power to issue, to fine a company in breach of our rules and to issue an enforcement notice requiring them to bring the service into compliance. If that enforcement notice does not secure compliance, we can also refer the matter to Ofcom, who have the power to impose a fine, which can be up to 5% of qualifying revenue or £250,000, whichever is the greatest. Playboy for 2 breaches, one in relation to Playboy TV and another in relation to Demand Adult, were fined £100,000 for breaches of Rule 11 in January of this year, and Strictly Broadband were fined, I think, £60,000 for similar breaches as well. Now, we always hope that things won't get as far as having to refer the matter to Ofcom, or as far as seeing fines paid. We don't get any of the money. It's fine, by the way. Very important to say that money goes to the UK Treasury, so it goes to pay down the UK's deficit. It doesn't go to the regulator in any sense. We would always rather that services brought themselves into compliance, that they were compliant in the first place. If they're not compliant, that when we bring it to their attention, they take rapid action to make their services compliant. And in actual fact, in most cases, services do. Once we bring to their attention that we believe that they're in breach of the regulations, they take action to bring their service into compliance. And some service providers, adult service providers, have actually said to me they welcome what we're doing because they would much rather operate in a system in which there's a level playing field where people are being required to put hardcore pornography out of reach of children because they don't actually, if they've felt pressured into going down that route of making hardcore content available free to view simply because their rivals are doing the same thing.
In the case of the Playboy appeal with Ofcom, they argue the point that the videos on their websites were too explicit to be regulated.
Yeah, that was an interesting argument to run, that a rule that is designed to protect children from extreme content shouldn't apply to services which only offer such extreme content. We thought that was a very poor argument, and that's why we found them to be an on-demand programme service. They did appeal that to Ofcom, and Ofcom Ofcom's ruling is very, very clear that services will be within ATVOD's jurisdiction if the content is TV-like, i.e. it's comparable to content that's available on television. It doesn't have to be identical. The difference between the explicit pornography that was available on the demand adult service and the pornography that's available on UK television is merely one of degree. Just because the ruder bits get edited out on television doesn't mean it's not comparable to what's being provided on the website version.
Well, what do you say about the argument that Rule 11 doesn't protect consumers but merely serves to punish services that operate in the UK?
Well, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about ATVOD's role among some providers. We haven't been charged with cleaning up the internet. We haven't been charged with making American websites behave themselves appropriately. We have been charged with regulating UK-based services. The fact that the internet is a global distribution mechanism was well known to those who drafted and passed the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. It was well known to the Parliament that passed the amendments to the Communications Act. And the decision was taken that regardless of what's happening in other territories, those who are operating from the UK should behave responsibly. If you are providing content which is potentially harmful to children, you have an obligation to keep that content out of reach of children. And saying that the Americans don't do it is not really a very good argument, in my view, for doing it itself.
And that brings the topic about ATVOD going after foreign websites that offer adult content in the UK. What's the latest with that proposal?
Well, you can't help when regulating UK adult industry but notice that most of the pornography that's available online is not being provided by providers who are located in the UK. Most of it's not even being provided from within the European Union, so it's not subject to the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. Now, given that our concern is to regulate UK services so that children using those services are protected, we can't help but reach a view as to the impact that we're having in terms of child protection more generally online. And so we've given the benefit of our experience, expertise and understanding to policymakers by simply posing some questions for policymakers to consider if they want to do something about children's access to pornography on websites that are not located within the UK. And what we've pointed out that the Crown Prosecution Service's guidance on the Obscene Publications Act appears to indicate that American websites which have free-to-view, unrestricted access to hardcore pornography on the homepage and on the free pages, when those websites are accessed from the UK, a technical breach of the Obscene Publications Act is occurring. And so what we've said to policymakers is, what might you do about that? We've said to the financial industry, funds are flowing from the UK using your services to these services which appear to be operating in breach of the Obscene Publications Act. Are you happy to be processing such payments? And the financial industry has said, well, we're not entirely happy about that, and we'd like to talk more with you about what might be done. And we are holding a summit on the 10th of October, which is going to be attended by the British Bankers Association, the UK Cards Association, the Payments Council, and leading payment scheme operators, which will look at what sort of response to that proposal the UK financial industry might want to make.
So you point out the companies and you would put them on a blacklist, or the banks would put them on a blacklist?
Well, I mean, the details are to be worked out. This is at the early stages of discussion. It's an idea which we have put out there, which the banks have indicated a willingness to discuss. One way in which it might operate would be to adopt the model that the internet service providers in the UK adopted with regard to child abuse images, which was to fund an organisation, in that case the Internet Watch Foundation, to maintain a blacklist of services which appear to be operating illegally, and then the banks would use that blacklist to block payments. Banks already block payments to all types of online service. They block payments to services which are offering pirated material, for example. They have a system in place already for blocking payments if they're convinced that the service is operating illegally in the country in which the consumer resides.
So you see this like a law that would be like gambling and tobacco regulating.
Well, I think you have in relation to adult pornography a product which is lawful for adults to consume, but which is grossly inappropriate at best for children. And as such, it is similar to gambling, tobacco, alcohol, knives, glue, all sorts of other products which have age restriction controls applied, whether online or offline. And I think when an industry is providing a product which is appropriate for adults but inappropriate for children, there is a responsibility for those who are involved in making that provision happen to take steps to ensure that children aren't exposed. And we're saying to the financial industry in the UK, you have a responsibility because your payment mechanisms are being used to facilitate provision of these services into the UK, then don't you have a responsibility to act as well?
Well, you've mentioned specific targets, and that's adult tube sites. They're all out there. You've specifically named.
To be clear, we have named any service that is allowing children to access hardcore pornography.
Yeah. You mentioned Pornhub. Pornhub is owned by Mandarin. They own a slew of adult websites that are tube sites. Let me ask you this. Can foreign website operators be potentially in breach of the obscenity law in the UK?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's certainly our understanding. If you look at the Crown Prosecution Service's published guidance on the application of the Obscene Publications Act, it's very clear that publication occurs not just in the territory where the images are uploaded, but also in the territory where the images are downloaded. So the breach occurs when the website is accessed from the UK, that's very clear in their guidance. And that's what we're saying to the financial industry, is that you have these sites that are not being dealt with at the moment they're not being dealt with by the enforcement agencies because those who appear to be perpetrating the offence are not within the UK jurisdiction. But the UK financial industry is within the UK and could take action in order to help to cut off funds to such services.
Now, one of the top sectors of the market is the live cam sites that adult entertainment offers. This law, or ATVOD, is only looking at companies that have streamed pre-recorded content. Is that correct? This does not apply to live cams.
ATVOD's remit in relation to the designation that's been given by Ofcom only applies to on-demand content. It doesn't apply to live content. Whether the banks would want to take action in relation to payments to live streaming is a matter for the banks, but our remit is restricted to on-demand content, not live content.
Can you give us a hint on proposals on how you target foreign websites?
No, we're at a very early stage of discussions. At the moment we have a proposal which is for discussion with the financial industry to see whether and how they want to take it forward. So any details of how that proposal will work in practice are to be developed if and when the financial industry decide to take that forward.
Putting the adult businesses on a tight leash, do you think that it puts a so-called disadvantage for adult companies in the UK to conduct business? UK has a large appetite for porn. It's the number 2 according to the country, according to our stats we've compiled from billers from adult. But it does put a disadvantage in terms of business. Would you like to address that?
Well, yes, I think we would recognise that if the UK providers have to have in place barriers which their rivals don't have, that places them at a certain commercial disadvantage. Now, we do have a responsibility in conducting our regulation to encourage innovation, investment, and competition in the UK, but that's not an overriding duty. our primary duty is to protect and provide children and consumers with the protections that are provided for in law. And I don't think that disadvantage can override the need to protect children from content which is potentially harmful to them.
For 18 months, the adult industry has had one member, Cliff Radcliffe, part of your board. He's leaving this week, so there will not be an adult voice. Do you think it's important to have the adult entertainment interact with the board and help come up with ideas and proposals to work this thing out?
I think it's very important that ATVOD, as a co-regulator working in partnership with industry, maintains a very healthy and constructive dialogue with all aspects of the industry it regulates. We have 4 industry slots on our board, and so we cannot have every sector of the industry represented at any one time. We were very pleased to have Chris on board. Chris has been a very excellent board member and has helped us to gain a very, I think, very comprehensive and well-informed insight into the concerns of the adult industry, into the way the adult industry operates, and that has been immensely useful in our work today, and we intend to maintain that dialogue, not just with Chris, but also others in the adult industry. Going forward, we've taken the view that we would like to see another sector represented on our board for the next period of time. We're going to particularly seek applications to replace Chris from those who operate on a very, very small scale, which is a sector that hasn't been represented at all on our board today. So it's about getting the balance of representation right over time. But we absolutely want to maintain a dialogue. Every provider of a notified service is invited to attend our industry forum, which meets 3 times a year. There is an adult grouping within that forum, and I would encourage any provider of a regulated service to get involved, to make sure your voice is heard in that forum, and to engage constructively with ATVOD. We want to help you to comply with Rule 11. That's what we want to do, and we would like to help you to do that in the way that disrupts your business the least. And we can do that better if we work with you than if we're in some sort of position of opposition. It also helps to keep our costs down. If we have a cooperative relationship in which you act proactively to keep hardcore material out of reach of children, and that makes the cost of regulation and therefore the regulatory fees lower than they otherwise have to be.
Well, speaking of voices, any questions? Miles.
Hi, Pete. Miles Jackman, Conscience Allen solicitor. Always a pleasure to hear someone actively misstating the Obscene Publications Act.
But can I ask you a simple question? Are ATVOD acting ultra vires?
No.
Do you want to think harder about that?
No, I'm quite happy with my answer.
You're happy that ATVOD are not acting without the correct statutory application of the guidelines, and that you are not acting outside the powers that you have adopted?
Yes, I'm very happy with that.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your answer.
Other questions?
Hi, my name is Nikki Hodge, I'm a journalist working on sex issues. I wanted to know, how do you define moral harm done to children by porn? And who defines that?
Well, the legislation requires that in order to be subject to the restrictions of Rule 11, material might seriously impair. And we've looked at all the available research that's out there. There have been a number of studies of data reviews conducted. Ofcom did one in 2010, which was contained in a report to DCMS. There have been others done by Visual Film Classification and others over the years. And what is clear when you look at the evidence is that there's an absence of conclusive evidence about harm done to children from exposure to hardcore pornography. And the reason for that is quite simple, because in order to get the sort of conclusive evidence that you would require to prove the matter beyond doubt, you would have to purposely expose children to hardcore pornography and see what happens to them. And no ethics committee is going to give a researcher permission to do that. So the question is whether, given the availability of evidence, given the evidence of clinical psychologists who tell us they've seen damage to children from exposure to hardcore pornography, is there a non-fanciful risk that hardcore pornography might cause moral harm to children? We think there is a non-fanciful risk. We think it might cause moral harm to children.
I understand that point, but I just want to know what you define by moral damage. What would that constitute?
Well, moral harm could be skewing a child's understanding of sex and sexual relationships.
Well, what would that be?
Well,
How does anyone define that?
how does anyone define
Well,
it?
how do we define, what I'm trying to get to is like, where does the moral compass sort of circulate? Where does it lie in this issue? Like, how do you define what morally appropriate attitudes and behaviour around sex are, and who defines those?
Okay, well some of the attitudes that psychologists have expressed concern about in terms of children's exposure to hardcore pornography concern attitudes to consent, for example.
Okay.
Thank you, Nikki.
Hi Peter, Vince Charlton, the SACP. Regardless of whether anything's ultra-virus or where the moral compass is, I think anybody that's a parent agrees in principle that children watching hardcore pornography is damaging somewhere down the line. So I think fair play on that point. Regarding the non-UK websites, can we just clarify, if your discussions, you say at an early stage, but if they go further down the line, we're talking a US website owner, 20% of their business comes from UK and Europe. You can't hit them financially in the UK because they're based outside, but what you can do is you're looking to stop the traffic, stop the flow of funds coming from UK users. So I just think, if we take it further down the line, I think we need to be very, very clear what the potential threats and the potential implications are to the industry.
Yeah, and I want to be really, really clear. This is not something that ATVOD is proposing to do. ATVOD's sole engagement in this idea is to actually come up with an idea and throw it out there for others to take up. Now, we're happy to facilitate conversations that the financial industry want to have and to give them our insight into the issue. But this is not something that ATVOD's proposing to use its funding to do itself. Okay, so this is something for others to do. It's just an idea that we have thrown into the mix. It's also not supposed to be an idea that solves the problem of children accessing adult content online. We don't think there are magic bullet solutions to that problem. We think there are a range of measures that need to be taken by all sorts of different actors in this area. We think that parents need to be encouraged to use parental control software. We think that parental control software itself needs to be made to work better. We think that children need to be given the sort of media education that enables them to be more resilient, to know what to do if they come across content that disturbs or upsets them. We think there are all sorts of measures that need to be taken, but we do think that there's those who are potentially profiting from services which appear to be operating in breach of UK law have a responsibility to think about whether they could do more as well. And that's all we've done. We've just posed a question to the financial industry. I'm very pleased that the financial industry has decided to take that idea seriously and is meeting together to see if they want to take it forward. I'm very pleased with that, but that's for them to decide. It's not something that Apple's proposing to do under its current constitution.
Hi. I understand that you're going for the won't somebody think of the children angle on this, and that's fair enough. Going to the banks, the people who process payment, but I've noticed on your site the list of people targeted, penalised for this, are mainly independent female porn producers on clips for sale sites, or people using sort of industry standards like clips for sale, CC bill, the kind of standard processing. And so why is it the individuals here who are being targeted and instead of the processing companies?
Well, the legislation doesn't apply to the processing companies. The legislation only applies to the provider of the service, i.e. the person or entity who is selecting and organising the content that appears. So I have no powers to require anything of CC bill because they're not a service. They're not the provider of the on-demand program service. So,
I mean, surely that just renders any independent porn producer helpless, because unless they've got their own alternative card processing system in place.
It's very clear there are plenty of processing systems out there which can restrict payments to credit cards only, and many services that we've been in contact with have taken those steps very, very quickly. In fact, we've seen people do it within days to turn off the debit card facility and restrict membership only to those who present a valid credit card. So it's perfectly possible to do it. In terms of us targeting particular types of provider, we're certainly not targeting small-scale providers. We do respond to complaints, however, and we have had a large number of complaints about services that are operating on clips for sale, and we have a duty to investigate those complaints to see whether they're compliant. So it may be that the large number of clips for sale, in fact I know that the large number of clips for sale services that have appeared we published in our annual report as being subject to investigation, those arose out of complaints to us that those services were operating in breach of Rule 1, 4 and 11.
Were those all complaints from one person?
Complaints from a small number of individuals.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not from the UK, but I'm from the Netherlands. But I have a question for you, because we do it a bit differently. What is the reason why you didn't focus on teaching the children media wisdom and parents how to cope with porn and teaching the children, but targeting the industry first?
Well, we don't have a remit or a duty or any funding to conduct media education. We have been given a very specific remit as a regulator, and that remit is to enforce the rules that are set out in the Section 368 of the Communications Act. And those rules are the rules that we've talked about already in relation to the adult industry. They're specifically a rule that requires material which might seriously impair the mental, moral, physical development of children must be kept out of their reach.
And you're sure that's more effective than going to parents and schools, etc. first?
No, I think I've said quite clearly on at least 2 occasions already today that I think that's one of many measures that needs to be in place in order to protect children online. I absolutely think that parents need to be encouraged to use parental control software. I think that parental control software needs to be improved because it doesn't work all the time. I think media education needs to focus on online safety, and we support efforts to do that. We work with the UK Council for Child Internet Safety. We've developed with other media regulators a service called Parent Port, which is a website that any parent can go to find out more about how to protect their children online. So absolutely, we think the action that we're taking in relation to requiring adult services to keep hardcore pornography out of reach of children by taking measures on those services is one part of a whole range of measures to protect children online. We don't think it's the only one, by any stretch of the imagination. Media education, parental controls are all very important as well.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Jamie McCann from Studio 66 TV. So I just wanted to ask you, you said you've got 4 places on the board for people from different sectors. What sectors, obviously we know the adult sector, but what other sectors would you identify that you wanted represented on the board?
Well, over time we would like to see every single sector.
But can you name some of those, other than the adult sector?
Yes, there'd be non-broadcast services, for example, platform operators, commercial broadcasters, public service broadcasters, those who offer primary music, those who offer primary sport. There are all sorts of different sectors that would have a claim to representation on the ATVOD board, and I hope over time we will see all of those sectors represented.
And how high on the agenda is child protection, or this issue of stopping minors accessing pornography? How high on your agenda is that?
On our agenda, it's our number 1 issue.
So do you think it was wise to remove the one representative from the adult sector that you had on the board when that is your primary goal?
I'm very happy to answer that. We don't have to have a representative of a particular sector on the board at a particular time in order to take effective action in relation to that sector. As I said, we were very happy to have Chris on our board. He has been an excellent board member. But one thing Chris didn't manage to do, although he gave us great insights into your industry, he didn't manage to secure buy-in from the industry.
I disagree.
One of the purposes of having a board member on board in a co-regulatory system is to try and encourage those who are seeking to avoid or evade regulation to come within the tent of regulation, to comply voluntarily. And we really didn't see a change in the behaviour of the adult industry in relation to ATVOD during the time of Chris's tenure. And we just thought that at the end of the 18 months, it was appropriate to seek a representative from a small-scale provider so that sector could be represented.
But Peter, I totally would disagree. It's taken some time. We've got to recognise this sector. We're faced against it from this international competition. We want to really regulate us and let everyone else do what they want to do, right? It's a real tough challenge, and I think Chris has put so much effort into trying to reach out to the adult sector. It takes a lot of time. There's people with different agendas, people who are really anti any form of regulation, and this stuff takes time, and I think you've really missed the trick here because the sector was starting to reach out to each other. There's communication. People are talking about, okay, we've got to work with a regulator, how can we do it? And we need a representative. If you really want to conquer the issues of child protection, which a lot of us in the adult sector agree is an issue, we don't want children accessing pornography, then you need the adult sector on board. We're the people who can give you the answers. If you don't have a representative on the board, and that is your key, you just said that's the highest thing on your agenda, it's absolutely crazy. How is anyone now, all the adult industry is going to look at now and say, see, the one person who was on the board has been removed. You're just turning yourself more into the enemy than you are already. We need dialogue.
I absolutely agree that we need dialogue, and I very much hope that the dialogue can continue over the next period of time. Our intention is to absolutely maintain dialogue with the adult industry. My door is always open to meet any member of the adult industry to discuss their concerns. We have an industry forum which adult industry members can attend and raise views, and you can put items on the agenda of that meeting, and we will listen to that. Chris will continue, I hope, to be a good friend to ATVOD, and will continue to make sure that we are aware of the issues that face the adult industry when facing the regulation that we are charged with enforcing. So there's no intention whatsoever to close down the dialogue. I very much hope that we can continue having constructive dialogue, and I hope that more in the adult industry will take the attitude that you have, that there is a responsibility to make sure that children don't access the hardcore pornography that you provide. But sadly, very many don't take that view at the moment.
But does ATVOD have a reputational concern that engaging with the adult industry makes them look bad, therefore you're going to distance yourself from the industry and present yourself as a knight in shining armour, as opposed to someone who actually wants to, get involved in some sort of cooperation whereby we can align the issues, which are child protection, somehow deal with them together, and then move on into being able to get back to business?
I don't think there's any barrier to us working together to deal with this issue. I'm very happy to work with anybody and everybody in this room who is committed to ensuring that hardcore pornography on video on demand services is kept out of reach of children, and I'll continue doing that. And I very much hope that adult providers will comply with their obligation to notify ATVOD if they're providing a notifiable service, will participate in the industry forum, will have their voices heard, and I think we can, that there is no barrier in the end of Chris's term to us continuing to have a constructive relationship with the adult industry.
What is the process for getting on board?
It's an open advertisement that will go out to all providers of a notified service. It is a qualification that you have to be employed by a provider of a notified service in order to fill one of those positions. There is a recruitment panel which has 4 people on it, one of whom is the chair of ATVOD, one of whom is the chair of the industry forum, which is an industry selected person, the deputy chair of the industry forum, which again is an industry selected person, and then an independent assessor. So it's a very open process which any provider can take part in.
Sorry, are you saying there's no point in people from the adult sector applying for that position?
No, I'm not saying that.
So why you just said you removed someone
from the adult sector because you felt that you needed representation from a different sector. So therefore, surely you're not going to consider someone from the adult sector, because the whole reason why you removed the person you had was to get representation from a different sector.
What we said, that some sectors overlap. What I said was we were particularly interested in getting for the first time a representative of a very small scale provider. That's something we haven't had to date, and there's no, a small scale provider could be providing any type of content, but we're particularly keen to get that sort of insight and experience into the heart of the board, because it's something we haven't had to date, and that's something that we have been criticised in other fora for not having any representatives from small scale providers. At the moment we've got somebody part of the Northern Shell Group, somebody part of the Sky Group, somebody part of the Channel 4. We do not have currently representation from a small scale provider. We're keen to get that in future.
Down to our last few minutes. More questions?
Chris Radcliffe, Portland TV. I'd just like to make a point to the industry. Obviously, my tenure with ATVOD has come to an end after an 18-month initial term. I think we talk about ATVOD having missed a trick here. I think the industry has missed a trick, and I think this demonstrates more than ever that we have to come together and present a united front. I realise that opinions were divided about my involvement with ATVOD, but by not coming together, by not having a coherent message that we could put to the regulatory policy makers, we have missed this trick. And it demonstrates that if we want to fight back, to work with regulation, I do believe in child protection. I believe that if we don't do something, further regulation will come. The government's been very clear on that. But please let us come together, at least the UK providers in the first instance, and present a united front. We have our differences, yes. We come from different sectors, even within the adult. I represent broadcast. There are much smaller providers. Through an open meeting that we have with Notified Adult Services, we've come together, and I believe there's been a meeting of minds. Jamie, you've been there. Rob, you've been there. Other people in this room have been there. I think we can demonstrate that we can find a coherent way forward. But that means that parties like UCAP, like Sex and Censorship, will all need to come to the table and see where the common ground and where the common objectives lie.
Yeah, just as a statement, really. I agree completely with Peter, the previous speaker, about the need to maintain this dialogue. I think the industry needs to look at an existing body, which is the SACP, which is an industry-funded body, and it's deliberately positioning itself at the moment to act as a conduit between the regulatory authority and the industry. So, I don't want to be on the ATVOD board, but it doesn't stop me conversing and having a meaningful dialogue with ATVOD and other regulators. So I think we're missing the point. You have to be on a board. You don't have to be on the board to get your point across and to translate that message across back to the industry. Look very closely at what we've already got. ASACP is there to put the message back to the industry and put the message to the regulators without the white noise or the polarised opinions of the entire UK is turning into North Korea, or the girls that were demonstrating outside yesterday. We're trying to put a reasoned argument from the industry to the regulators and make sure the regulators' message gets back to the industry. We are already there, and we have these conversations going.
Hi, thank you. I just want to go back to the fact that ATVOD aren't going to be regulating live cam sites. So I wanted to ask a question with regards to that for the sort of independent sort of cam girls that are based in the UK. With respect to the campsites that provide services such as uploading video content, which I would imagine would be a demand service, is that something that you are regulating as well or not?
Well, these answers always begin with it depends, I'm afraid, because the criteria that define an on-demand programme service need to be interpreted. And the key one in this respect is the principal purpose of the service, the provision of TV-like content. And a website might contain a single service, or it might contain a number of different services. So it's quite possible that a website that offers live webcams, but also on-demand video content, would be considered to be a single on-demand programme service, or two separate services, one of which was a regulated service and one wasn't. So I'm afraid the answer is always going to be, it depends. It will depend on the particular nature of the website and how it's structured and what sort of content is there and what the balance of content is.
Okay, and who would be responsible? The producer who is uploading the content, or the site that is promoting it and essentially enabling customers to purchase it via their system?
Responsibility for the service lies with the person who has control over the organisation and selection of the programmes that appear on the service. So whoever's deciding which videos go up and how they're displayed, so which ones appear on the homepage, which ones don't, that would be the person who has responsibility for the service.
So the independent cam girl at home uploading her videos is the one that needs to pay ATVOD there?
If they have control over which videos are appearing on the service and how they're organised, then it would be their responsibility.
Not
to
adult work or clips for sale.
It is in the situation that you've described, it would be most likely to be the person who is uploading the videos.
Okay, thank you.
Down to the last few minutes. Any more questions? One moment. Miles?
Hi. Sorry, Pete. I've just recorded you as saying that
According to your interpretation of the CPS guidelines and the Obscene Publications Act, publication occurs at point of download as well as upload. I have a copy of the Crown Prosecution Service Obscene Publications guidelines here. I can't quite find that there. Could you possibly direct me to it?
Not without looking at myself. I've got a copy.
Okay.
RV Parent is specifically concerned with publishing electronic data under the Obscene Publications Act and states that the mere transmission of data constitutes a publication. It is clear from the decision in RV Parent and in the early case of RV 6th of April 2000, unreported, that there is publication both when the images are uploaded and when they are downloaded. In the case of RV the Court of Appeal held that the content of American websites could come under British jurisdiction when downloaded in the United Kingdom.
that's correct, but unfortunately it doesn't take me to the case of RGS, which I'm wondering if you know about because it's not in the guidelines.
What I've quoted to you is the current guidance of the Crown Prosecution Service. That is all I have ever claimed to be representing, and I think you will have to accept that I've represented that guidance accurately in what I've said
So
today.
do you have any interaction with the Crown Prosecution Service as, for example, whether water sports, fisting, etc. are types of activities which could be portrayed in the guidelines?
I'm not concerned with the application of the Obscene Publications Act in day-to-day. Well,
you were on the board at the BBFC. The BBFC interacted with CPS and the police in drafting the guidelines. Are you merely applying them?
We're not applying Obscene Publications Act guidelines at all. We do not enforce the Obscene Publications Act. We enforce Section 4A of the Communications Act 2003. It's not my job to interpret or enforce the Obscene Publications Act. All I've done is point out to the financial industry what the Crown Prosecution Service's guidance on the Obscene Publications Act says. Coincidentally, I am actually one of the people that the Crown Prosecution Service consult when they're drawing up guidance on legislation relating to pornography, and I give them my opinion, but the opinions that are on that screen are the opinions of the Crown Prosecution Service, and I've simply accurately reflected those opinions to those in this room and to the financial industry. It's up to those people what to do.
That there is room for manoeuvre, then, if you have given your own personal opinion. Is that correct?
So what's the question?
You stated that you consult. Therefore, there is room for manoeuvre. What are you doing for the industry on that point?
I have not been consulted on the guidelines on the Obscene Publications Act that exist there. What I said was that the Crown Prosecution Service do seek my advice when they are considering guidance on various areas in relation to pornography. Whether they listen to my view or not is neither here nor there.
All right, we are at the end of our session here. Thank you very much, Pete, for joining us at XBiz.